Welcome to ROI Unfiltered, the podcast that goes beyond investments, the deals, and the headlines, digging deep into the real stories, the grit, the raw inspiration behind the success of entrepreneurs, athletes, and entertainers on their way to the top. No facades, no fluff, just pure, unfiltered truth. This is ROI Unfiltered.
So I'm sitting here today with Marshall Moore, the Director of Community Impact and Financial Wellbeing over at Untapped Credit Union. And we're here in Colorado, and you've been in the industry for 5 years. You've been in this business for 2.5 years, but you were a teacher as well for 10 years, who are ultimately, I believe, some of the best guests that we have on this show, because I think that all of us are teachers in life when it comes to everything in general, with whatever we're selling, with whoever we're teaching, or if we're parenting or coaching or anything like that. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
I mean, I'll start right there. Is in my experience, to back up on my story a little bit further, starting as a teacher, I think there's a lot that comes up around money in general. But one of the things is that as a teacher, sometimes you start in that industry because you want to help people, and you have what, many people call it the servant's heart or whatever it is, right? And for me, when I first thought about getting out of teaching, because I saw that there was a need in the bigger, wider world for some of what I had to offer, I also didn't have some of the personal confidence to actually go out there and do some of the things, because I was like, I've been a teacher for 10 years. And so I defined myself through that role. And one of the things that I've learned through the process of getting out there and kind of figuring out my own way of doing business and being an influencer and an impactor in the business world is that teachers have a huge skill set that matters in a lot of regards. When you think about leadership even, teachers have many of the skills that go into leadership, because essentially leadership is connection and communication. Like, you can be a visionary and have all the best ideas in the world. If you can't communicate how to go forth and execute on those ideas, then what does it matter at the end of the day?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that's been really cool about the process of getting out into the broader business world and recognizing that many of the skills that teachers have are really valuable out there in the world. So I actually love talking to many teachers nowadays and encouraging them to go and use their skills in many regards, and in a lot of fun ways too.
Yeah. Even if it's like setting up a side hustle, or
100%.
Getting into the business world, or consulting somebody else, or making money on the side or whatever. I think that that's great. And I love that you brought up the leadership side of it, because our teachers are leaders. And one of the things that I was taught too, the more you learn, the more you earn. And so you always want to, be smart, build your skill sets. And one of the things that I love about teachers too is they have discipline. Ultimately, most of them are trustworthy. They have to be reliable. They're teaching our youth. They do a lot of things that get overlooked. That is a great skill set to have. So I think that you're spot on with all of that stuff. What did you teach throughout your 10-year teaching career?
I was a math teacher. So actually, my story, I'll tell a little bit more of my story here. And then I will put a bookmark in this, but there's a little bit more to be said on the front of leadership, I think, as a skill on its own too. So put a bookmark in that, come back to it. But for me, this actually turns into a lot of my story and how I got to where I am today. I grew up as a science kid. I loved getting outdoors. I lived in Virginia, so I grew up in Virginia. So I was like, hey, how do I get outdoors? Well, I'm going to go to the lake and go fishing, go kayaking, and, spend the day just hunting for bass. And for me, I ultimately ended up going into the sciences. I got my degree in biogeochemistry, which is essentially like, how do elements cycle through the environment? I loved the work that I got to do, but I got to do a ton of research as an undergraduate, like sitting in the lab and sometimes micropipetting samples into what felt like eternity. Like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to not be under a fume hood? And my undergraduate advisor was like, hey, before you go and get your PhD, I always wanted to go and be a professor and do a little bit of research, a little bit of teaching. She's like, hey, before you go do your PhD, at least make sure you like the other side of being a professor, and that's teaching. And so I went to go teach AP chemistry at a little local high school for what was meant to be 1 year, and it turned into 10 years of teaching just because I fell in love with the process of it. And for me, like the big thing was, how do we create curriculum that's a little bit more real world? So much stuff is disassociated from anything kids are ever going to use in the future.
Yes.
And so that's where, after 2 years of teaching AP chemistry, I took the leap into teaching math. And that's really where I spent most of my time, obviously. But the first year that I was teaching second semester seniors math, I'm supposed to be teaching them about conic sections to prepare them for, calculus. And you know how it goes. Like, they're seniors. They get senioritis. They're like, when are we ever going to use this stuff? And I'm like, hey, if I'm just being real with you, like, you're never going to use conic sections again. And so I ended up kind of saying, like, what are we doing here? I'm going to throw out this curriculum. I was lucky. I was able to have a lot of flexibility with what I was able to teach while still trying to hit upon standards and all of that stuff. And so I threw out that curriculum and said, basically, hey, we're going to do what became a financial literacy curriculum. My original goal, though, was just to teach them how to use Excel, because that's the math that we actually use in the modern world. And then after doing some Excel work for a little while, it became so clear that, oh my goodness, like, we live in a capitalist society that just throws us to the wolves, financially speaking. We don't get any type of training, and that stuff was really important. Other teachers started coming in and saying, hey, can we do an after school session? Because, like, I need to get my finances in order,
This episode is brought to you by Crispy Cocktails. All right, listen, you're out here living that Colorado life, hitting the trails, floating the river, or just kicking back after a long day. You don't want some sugary, fake-tasting seltzer that leaves you bloated and regretting it. That's why Crispy Cocktails was made. Colorado's the #1 ready-to-drink vodka-based cocktail. 6 times distilled, premium vodka, all natural flavors, gluten-free, and 7% ABV. Crisp, refreshing goodness in a can. Blue Squeeze, Tropical Smash, King Peach, Cherry Press, whatever vibe you're on, they got it. Born right here in Colorado to fit your lifestyle. And stay crispy. Crispy Cocktails, available now at over 500 Colorado locations. For more information, visit crispycocktails.com.
And so ultimately, that's where the idea sprung of, hey, like, there's a bigger, broader need for financial education more widely in our society. How can I go out there and do that?
Yeah, I think that is such a good point, because as entrepreneurs and just people in general, I don't think that the schools really prepare us enough for the real world and what's actually going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? So it's getting out there. Nobody taught me how to balance the checkbook or budget my time or make a schedule or do the inventory or look at my margins or, build spreadsheets in Excel. And you get a little bit of that in school, but I think that the system can be redone, and you were smart to redo that, to teach those kids some real world examples, because I really do think that my first year in the School of Hard Knocks, which have been my entrepreneurship career, I learned so much more than I would have in 4 years of college, and just in real world examples. And that's when it's really going to affect you, because you're dealing with real money, you're dealing with real people, you're dealing with real businesses. And when you get thrown out to the wolves, to have those tools in your belt would really set you up for success. So that's definitely good for you to do those types of things. And then ultimately you end up in the business banking industry and working for the credit union. And how has that kind of transition into your life?
Yeah, I mean, this has been kind of the way that I answered the question, hey, how do we go out there and do more of that foundational financial education and coaching in our society? Because, you can go and try to work with a financial advisor or a financial planner. I thought about going down that path myself, but I didn't, because there are certain blocks in place, just the way that the business is set up. And specifically, if I wanted to be a financial advisor, in general, there's some exceptions out there, but in general, you're going to want to work with clients who have at least $250,000 or $500,000, right? Because you're going to manage their portfolio. You're going to charge AUM, assets under management, which is a percentage of their total portfolio size. And that means that by the structure of the business, you really don't have the time to answer the more foundational stuff like, what are the menu of options out there for what a budget could even look like? And more specifically for me, the money psychology side of things, because that is where most people at the end of the day, we have an idea of what we should be doing to manage our money well, but we just don't do it. And so the question is why? Well, the psychology piece is where that comes into play, and also a little bit of the behavioral finance side of things, which is a total other rabbit hole that we could also go down. The distinction between the behavioral finance and the financial psychology, which I think is worth everybody at least knowing somewhat to start their financial journeys.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the behavioral side of money management. And I like the psychology side too, because we all should do better. We all know what we should do, right? And I've talked about this in other podcasts too. It's like, we should do this, we should do that, or whatever. We kind of should all over ourselves.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But at the same time, what do you tell your clients or customers that they should do? And how do you change their thoughts about money? How do you change their behaviors when it comes to money to do better for themselves? I mean, do you watch over that, or do you let them go? How do you give them the tools to do a better job?
Yeah. Well, let's start there. This is more a fine point, but with the idea of what we should do, I will start by saying nobody should take my advice or anybody else's advice out there, right? Like, we could run an experiment and see if it works for us. That is a simple shift that I think really does end up mattering for people to get out of, as you mentioned, shooting all over ourselves. Like we can do that forever, and I think psychologically that won't always benefit us. But really, the starting place is the fact that we all come to money from a different perspective. And it's not just, did I grow up without it, or did I grow up with an overabundance of it? Of course, you're going to see it from a different angle if you grew up in one of those circumstances, but you could have been anywhere along the spectrum of income, and you could still see money as being the root of all evil, right? Like, the thing that makes big corporations do unethical things. Or you could have, again, been anywhere along the spectrum of income and grown up in an entrepreneurial family, or had a mindset more like you do. And then you might see money more as the value exchange that you get when you do good in the world. So if you believe one of those things, whether or not you even consciously realize that you believe that, you think you're going to handle your money differently?
Oh yeah.
Probably, right?
Yeah.
And that's more my story is I grew up kind of, and there's many reasons for this, but I grew up kind of believing that money was the root of all evil. That's part of why I went in to do the work that I did, trying to just, being a teacher was really about you're not going to make much money, but who cares? That's not what money is about. It's, that's not what life is about. Money is just one of the things that you don't need to find happiness. And yet at the same time, it's the tool that we use to exchange value in our society. And so therefore it kind of is the thing that ultimately allows us to design the lives we want to live,
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely important. How do you think that you got those beliefs when you were younger, that money was the root of all evil?
So my story is, many people probably have, if they look back on their own histories, some type of a story that's not going to be the same, but that you can start to see patterns that repeat through generations. And so for me, my dad, he grew up in a family where his dad, my grandfather, he was a post-depression person who was kind of one of those people storing cash under mattresses, and he was always saving for everything.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a story. My dad played football when he was in college, and he's a big guy as a result. He was telling his dad at some point in his later working career how he didn't need to go and get custom ties, because he could just buy a normal tie and he'd take it to the dry cleaners and they would adjust the little catch on the back of it for him so that it would fit his neck.
Because it was so big.
And they would do that for $2. And his dad went, $2? You'll pay $2 for that? Save your money,
Yeah.
And so he, as a result, kind of grew up more like, hey, money is not going to be an issue for my family. And as a kid growing up, I don't think I saw it the same way that I do now. I have a much better relationship with my dad now at this point, but when I was growing up, I think there was some strain between us, partially because he wasn't around. He was off making money and trying to make sure that we never had to worry about it. But also, I sort of came to the belief that, hey, it matters that you go and like play catch with your kid or what, like some of those things matter also. And so now I understand it much better. But as a kid, you know how you are, you're angsty and all of that stuff. I think that greatly influenced my views and made me feel like, hey, you don't need money to live a happy and successful life. And at this point, my views are certainly nuanced. I still feel that there's a lot of joy that can be found even at certain income levels where you don't have, the ability to choose to do anything you want. It's, you can go into sort of more stoic philosophies and stuff like that. But that ultimately, by just having a few simple shifts in your life, and especially being able to see the playing field when it comes to money and know what dials you can turn to ultimately give yourself more options in life, those things are pretty easy to do without falling in love with money and, ultimately becoming the person who just chases after it and becomes what I think I thought as a kid, one of those people,
Yeah, or the stereotypical greedy person, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that everybody's got to find a good balance in their lives when it comes to business, their relationships, their family, their personal life, their friends, and their money life too, your financial life. Everybody wants to be comfortable. Everybody wants disposable income. But not a lot of people have those tools to make those things happen.
Yeah.
And in our society, I think that we get bogged down. We try to chase the Joneses, for, lack of better words. And then we get into a situation that's difficult to get out of, which causes a lot of angst, causes a lot of anxiety, causes a lot of problems, frustrations and stresses in your life. And then that ultimately, brings the entire well-being of yourself down, which I love your title here, the Directory of Community Impact, which to me would tell me that you do a ton of stuff for the community, that you help out, you're a giver, not a taker, that you want to build in the local community and make things better, and the financial well-being. So that to me is more than just the person, right? That's and more than just the money. Your financial well-being is the person that you can become and have the right tools and ideas to handle everything and do things the right way for you, because nobody does it like I do it.
Yeah.
Nobody does it like you do it, but you can educate your customers, your entrepreneurs, your business people, whoever you work with, to really have a better idea and know, and then you don't feel so uncomfortable, trying to figure those things out.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think that that's great. And tell me a little bit about how you got this title, because we were laughing about it earlier, and the Director of Community Impact and Financial Wellbeing. And what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So to catch on a thread from what you were just talking about, it is important to note that there are a lot of different types of wealth, right? It's financial is one of them, financial well-being. But if you don't have your health, what does the finance stuff, what does the money matter, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to be said for, the 5 types of wealth, if you will, and all of that type of stuff.
What would those 5 types of wealth be to you?
So there's a number of different ways that you can categorize it, but Sahil Bloom wrote an awesome book about it. James Clear also writes a little bit about it, but you can have social well-being, right? Social wealth, and that's really I think that's huge. I think that's the part where community becomes super valuable and why I love being able to still get to do my work locally. There's a bookmark there also. And then I will come back to this title as well.
Yeah.
Health is one of them also. Financial health or well-being is another huge one. And so, when you think about putting all of them together, it is important to be able to ultimately design our lives where we do have a balance. It's really easy when you want to think about growth to focus on maybe one aspect at a time and to forget about the others, right? So that's one of the things that comes up in the financial world as well, right? Is you can forget about your health, or you can potentially forget about your community in the pursuit of money, which is one of the things that I was always like trying to avoid, essentially, right? One more note on the community side of things, and then I'll let that lead us into the title also.
Yeah.
But the community side of things I find to be really interesting because we are in an age where people went through the pandemic, we learned how to do a lot of communications remotely. Many people enjoy being able to work remotely. I certainly do enjoy being able to have some days of the year where I am working from home. And also, I think that especially in the wake of the pandemic, we felt it a little bit, but especially now as we enter the age of AI, I think it becomes especially important that we are leaning into our real live in-person communities. And you can see that even in the way that people are interacting with media nowadays. Like, we get on Instagram, and I don't know one person who's like, oh yeah, I love just getting on Instagram and just scrolling.
Doom scrolling.
Lost. Yeah. And
you can go down that rabbit hole
you
for sure.
can, absolutely.
It is hard to get out of.
And also the way in which people are digesting that information now, as we begin to see more and more, for example, AI created videos.
Yeah.
I think that's where people are like, okay, like, cool, fine, you can do this, but also it becomes really valuable to have a real in-person connection with people, to run a live class where you can actually interact, not just have digital resources available. So I'm thinking a lot about that in terms of how do we develop the communities that we want to develop, because ultimately, I think the implications are really big. You look at what has happened kind of generationally as we have been able to access more and more information online. And part of what has happened is it is degrading the roots of our civic conversation as well. And so that's one of the areas where there's actually this cool phenomenon that just happened this past weekend. It was put on by Longer Tables, where they did this mile-long table. And the whole point of this exercise basically is, hey, let's bring together our community to sit down and have a meal, share a meal together over this long table. Just, people who we don't know, neighbors, all of that stuff. And you come to this event with two rules. One is you don't talk about work, because we're so likely to define ourselves by what we do, and you actually see this at the event where people are like, come up to people and they're like, hey, I'm Marshall, nice to meet you. What do you do? Wait, no, I'm not going to ask you what you do.
Yeah.
But then once you get into those types of situations, you begin to realize the power of simply connecting with other people and also shifting your questions slightly. So instead of, just fact-based questions, you can start to ask more types of questions that ask about people's experiences. And so an example would be, okay, I'm not going to ask you what you do, but let me just ask, where are you from? And if you ask that, you can get a pretty standard answer, like, oh, I'm from Denver, Colorado. Okay, cool. Or you can ask that in a way that draws upon people's experiences and be like, do you think that where you're from has contributed to the person you become today? Oh, interesting. How? Like, tell me more,
Yeah.
And you get a completely different type of answer. So anyway, all that to say, the community aspect, I think, is huge. And in terms of this idea of kind of like creating your own title, which we could take that in a number of different ways. On the financial side, it's really important to talk about expenses versus income. Income generation is huge, and it's something that we can do consciously. But one of the ways that I say I kind of created this title in a way, essentially what happened is I was trying to figure out, how do we do free foundational financial education in our community? And I didn't know the answer to that. And ultimately what I realized is credit unions have a not-for-profit community chartered structure. They want to be able to do good back into the communities that they serve. The fact that credit unions are a not-for-profit means that, unlike a bank, which is a traditional company structure, you have investors that want a return on their money. So basically you have one objective, which is, how do we increase shareholder returns? And many banks do a great job of doing other things in the community as well. I don't want to, but the model of a credit union being, hey, it's a not-for-profit organization, so any profits that we make, we give back to our members, of course, through, high yields on deposits and low rates on loans. But at the end of the day, we recognize that nobody ever built a wealthy life by saving 0.5% on an auto loan, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have to engage in positive, healthy, ongoing conversations about our money if we want to build that vision for ourselves of what a wealthy life could be. So that's really where I brought all of these years of financial curriculum that I had been teaching to seniors, brought it into the credit union space and said, hey, how do we do this for our community in a way that actually resonates, that we can, get around some of these ideas and start to use them in our everyday lives. So that's a little bit where that creation of the title kind of came from.
Yeah, and I like it. I really dig that it's all encompassing, and it definitely helps your customers feel more welcome, more comfortable in talking to you, especially if they want to get some of their questions answered. Plus, it gives more value to the community and your clients as well.
Yeah.
So, it gives you, added value to everything that you guys promote and everything that you do. And I like how you described the structure of credit unions versus big banks and other things too. So do you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, or who are the people that you work with mostly?
Yeah. So it is a lot of community members. It focuses more so on people younger than 40 in general, which is a little bit of an interesting trend that we could talk about more. I think that especially kind of the millennial generation and younger started to develop a different view of money, let's say. And so I work with a lot of those folks more so than our older generations, although those conversations are also awesome. And simply because of the makeup of our community, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. And I shouldn't even say the makeup of our community. That's America, right? Small business is the majority of businesses in the United States. And so when you think about small business, one of the things that happens is you get entrepreneurs who are really good at their thing. Maybe they, are a mental health therapist and they start a counseling practice. They're really good at that, but sometimes the idea of understanding cash flow, understanding the big three statements, the profit and loss, the statement of cash flows, and the balance sheet, and trying to, do basically CFO level work, forecasting things forward using those statements, that's not what they started their business to be able to do. And so if we can create some principles that help to make that work within, again, our money psychology, then that's something that has been really motivating for me on the entrepreneur side of things.
Yeah. So it's awesome that you work throughout the experience with the entrepreneur on a lot of different things. Do you work on the lending side of things as well to get money for entrepreneurs or other clients?
So as a company, we do.
Yeah.
I personally do not.
Okay.
I have, so when I first got into the financial world and wanted to do this education stuff, I saw a pathway in terms of going through the loan side of things. So I've gotten to have a lot of experience with underwriting. I did some origination myself as well, and that has been a great background for me to be able to engage in more conversations with entrepreneurs. I think when it comes to the loan side of things, I will, at the end of the day, always, for the specific details, refer entrepreneurs to our business services team, who they're amazing at it. However, what my role is really how can we see the playing field a little bit better when it comes to making strategic decisions for our business growth. And so an example might be even deciding what type of company you are or want to be. And so I'm not saying this to, in fact, much of what this does is maybe slow entrepreneurs down from getting funding, or whether it be through a loan or through venture or angel or friends and family rounds, whatever. Because when they do that, I want them to be really intentional about how they go about that process. I'll tell you a little bit more about this because I think it's relevant to the situation. I think, first of all, that there's a vision in our society of kind of how a business grows. And we are always pushing for growth, right? And that's what we hear. It's like, oh, we got to keep growing. And I think that makes a lot of sense if you are, let's say, Google, and you're building the next platform that's going to serve 100 million users. It's really important to be able to grow in that regard. If you're going to serve 100 million people or more than that, 1 billion people, then there are certain amounts of product optimization, certain talent that you need to get in place in order to build the product that's going to be able to do that. And so, of course, you take on lots and lots of capital. Typically, that's in the realm of venture capital. And, from there, venture capitalists are famous for kind of being like, don't worry about growth, right? They've invested, don't worry about growth, or don't worry about profit. Sorry, don't worry about profit. Don't worry about profit.
They're interested in growth. Lots of growth.
Until the moment where they want a return.
Yeah.
And then it's like, when is it going to be profitable? When is it going to be profitable, right? And so I think that this distinction is one that is really valuable for smaller entrepreneurs to think about is I don't think that Google story of raising tons and tons of capital and then being able to grow first, wait for profitability later, I don't think that applies across the entire spectrum.
Definitely not.
The more that you are a small business serving a local community, the more I think our bias needs to be profit first.
Yeah.
And when you think about it from the perspective of whether it's a bank that's lending money or whether it's an investor, whether that's for smaller businesses, typically venture capital is not for smaller businesses in general, but they might be going after some type of an angel investor or even, like I mentioned, a friends and family round. In that regard, the thing that I think we sometimes miss is that no matter who the investor is, even if it's your friends and family round that you're raising, there is still some amount of them asking the same question that the venture capitalist investor is asking, which is, the same thing that all investors ask is, how do I get paid for the risk that I'm taking? And one way to de-risk that investment for people is to be profitable sooner. And so I think that the more that we have that bias as small to medium-sized businesses to be profitable first and to, as Mike Michalowicz would call it, to make profit a habit, the more we actually are ultimately going to also be able to take opportunities to grow as well, or take on funding and things like that. But being profitable first does require us to get really creative too.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to open up more opportunities down the road for everything that you want to do. And being profitable, takes a lot of pressure off of everything as well.
Yeah.
So, and I always say that sales cure business if you're struggling. And how do you get more and more sales? And on top of it too, I always look at, when you're looking at risk evaluation, you want to try to keep your expenses as low as possible.
Yeah.
And look at your income versus what you're putting out and how can you be profitable. I mean, that's one of the things that we're working on with Crispy right now too, is how do we get to break even as fast as we can and be profitable and keep it within your margins and balance your employees, balance your marketing budget, balance your production budget, control all aspects of it and see it. And most people are just like, oh, well, I need to order more product, or, oh, I just need to get out there and make more sales. Well, you can make more sales, but if you're losing money on every sale, maybe sales won't cure it because you haven't looked at that side of it as well.
Exactly.
So you kind of come in, so you'll basically look at the entire, let's call it umbrella or cloud, or the entire picture, and then kind of navigate it for your clients or entrepreneurs and kind of put them on the right path and say, hey, these are some of the things that you need to look at. These are some things that you need to do. How does that work?
Yeah. So I like to say, both on my personal finance, education and coaching folks, and also with entrepreneurs, I like to say, hey, at the end of the day, what I do is I'm looking to be able to empower you. I want to give you a hammer, give you a tape measure, give you a tool belt, and then you're going to go and decide what you want to build with it and where you're going to drive the hammer and what this is going to look like at the end of the day. But most of us, we haven't even seen the menu of options out there. So when we're making that decision, it's like, where do I even start? What are the best frameworks to use? And I think one of the ways to go about evaluating what framework should I use is to be able to see the playing field, to see the bigger picture. Like I always think about back in, way back in the day when I played football in college, every practice, every game, didn't matter. You always watch film afterwards. And the difference between watching film from the box and seeing the whole field, you're watching yourself on plays that you remember the POV vision through the face mask of being like, why did I go there? You know, what was I doing? But if only I had been able to see, you know, the playing field from a Madden NFL type view, then like I would have seen that this was happening and, oh, I can make an adjustment here and make a better decision. And so that's like the thing that's cool about our finances is we can actually see the playing field. We can learn the rules of the game. And within that, ask what are the things that really matter for us there. And so on the entrepreneur side of things, oftentimes that may look like you know, introducing, actually, you know, what first I will generally ask about is even more foundational than profitability and the finances, which is, you know, like, tell me about your business in general.
What are you doing?
What differentiates your business, right? And because ultimately, like, a business can be better or it can be different. And being better tends to be pretty hard. Like, there's some big players in the space. It's going to be hard to make that quality difference so unique. But being different may take us, you know, to places where we have to get creative and think outside the box, but it can differentiate us from the competition in one specific unique way. And even just from the you know, being introduced to Crispy several weeks ago, I was like, oh man, this is different, interesting, cool. Like, and I've already been seeing some very early successes in that regard, where you have a tent out at the local Colorado Summit Frisbee game, and people are like, "Whoa, cool! Like, let me go check that out." I'm always used to just seeing the standard beers here, which are great beers, but like, this is different. Ooh, let's go check that out. Right?
Yeah, it's definitely different. And what we didn't want to be the exact same as like the High Noon or the White Claw, or even Truly.
Right.
So we added all natural flavors. Right. We went with 7%, where everybody else is around the 4 to 5%.
Yep.
So we're a little bit higher alcohol. Most people don't know this, but High Noon, White Claw, those guys use malt-based alcohol. So technically, they're really more of a beer than anything. And that's what a seltzer really is, where we use 6 times distilled vodka in ours. So it is a cocktail. You know, and then we have the gluten-free, all-natural. We're local here in Colorado. But we're running into the problem where our flavor profile is different and people seem to really like it. And so we're actually running out of product, which is a good problem to have. And so right now we're working on production. We're trying to get it in, but we've run out of our 12-pack boxes. We've run out of our Blue Squeeze. I've run out of our Cherry Press right now. We just ran production. It's coming here right now, but those are good problems to have. But at the same time, we're trying to navigate those and figure it out and do everything as well. So that's one of the things that differentiates us in, I would say, a good way. But if you look at differentiating us in kind of a bad way, we do have a little bit more carbs. We do have a little bit more sugar, but it's all natural sugar.
Yeah.
We do have some more calories than some of the other ones as well. So those are some of the hurdles that we have to navigate. And we see both sides of the spectrum.
Yes.
So we kind of narrow down our focus on who our consumer is and how we can market to those people and really try to differentiate ourselves on the taste profile of things. But that's so good that you bring up those points, because people don't really look at that. And you look at a plumber or an electrician or people that are doing trades, you know, that really can't be differentiated that much. A plumber's a plumber, an electrician. You do have to get creative to find different ways, but what can make you better might be the customer service that you have.
Yeah.
Or, you know, how you treat your clients, which then goes back to customer service, or how fast you can be, or if you can come in under budget and in time.
Yeah.
Some of those things that customers or consumers see as high value ticket items, right?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, like, when you talk about a plumber or electrician, like, one differentiator right there is like, oh, whoa, they called me back immediately. And
right.
Like, wow. Or one of the ones that I found to be really valuable for me is I'm the type of person who I you know, same thing as in my finances, like, I want to see the playing field. When I make a decision about, hey, I'm going to, you know, upgrade, my water heater broke down and I'm going to upgrade it, I want to know what are the pros and the cons of each of them. And I want to understand fully, you know, the advantages versus disadvantages. I'm somebody who recognizes that there are money lenses that we can see money through. And the predominant lens that we see money through in the United States is the lens of cost. Well, what does that cost? But Warren Buffett said it, right? Where cost is what you pay, quality is what you get. So I'm like, yeah, I recognize that I may pay more for some, you know, add-on or a different type of new water heater because mine broke down. But I want to know, like, what do I actually get in return? What are the problems that might have happened? What are, I live at a particular, I'm up on Lookout Mountain outside of Golden, so we're at high elevation. Like, are there any concerns that might come up in that regard, right? I had a plumber who was up at our place recently who's like, basically knew all of these things and was walking me through them in depth. I'm like, you're differentiated from the other plumbers immediately. Like, this is really cool. Thank you for letting me to see this in a particular way. But then the challenge is, like, how do you find your target market specifically, right? Because if that's your unique differentiator, then what you want to do is find the people who care about that. So often we, as a business, we have a solution. We have a product that we're like, hey, let me tell you about all the features of this product, without actually going and understanding who our target customer is and what their pain points are and what they are particularly looking for, and then beginning to talk about our solution, our product, in terms of their pain point, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's like reading the book, Building a Story Brand.
Yes.
And
such a good one, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. So it's having a story behind it. And I like how you talked about the water heater example. Then we could come full circle about being a teacher. You basically hired him because he was a teacher on his knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah. So, really knowledge is power, in a sense that you really can help educate your consumer. And in building the story brand, what I got out of that the most was make your customers or your potential clients the hero in the product.
Yes.
They don't want to hear, everything that it can do for you. It's everything that it can do for them.
Yes.
What does this provide to them, or how does it make their life valuable? How does it make their life better? How does it provide value in order to exchange the cost for that item? And that's how you really have to see your business.
Yes. You are not the hero in your customer's story, right? Yeah. You're the Obi-Wan. You can be the Yoda, you can be the kind and compassionate guide.
And they call that the guide in the book, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So the guide that takes you to that spot.
Yes.
So very cool. Well, I appreciate you so much for being on and being so knowledgeable and teaching me some new things about your industry and everything that you do as well, and everything that you do for the community. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. If there was some life advice or a piece of financial advice that you would tell one of the listeners or somebody who's coming up that, they don't know exactly where to start, what would be that advice?
There's so many directions that you can take this.
Kind of, specific to that person, but what do you wish that you would have heard a long time ago that today?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there's a lot of different things that come up often in the work that I do. I mentioned this briefly, and like, we could go on for literally hours on this front. By the way, for anybody who's listening to this, like, I'm out there. Connect with me. We can talk about your specific questions. One of the things that comes up often is simply this idea that so much personal finance advice is all about, you just got to control your expenses. And ultimately, again, I think that more people should be seeing the playing field than focusing on expenses. I think more people spend more time focused on, like, trying to reduce the $5, lattes or organic blueberries at the grocery store than they do focused on the big lever of what's my savings rate and how do I increase it by 0.5% or 1% every single year. That's life changing, right? But getting out of that side of things, so much personal financial advice is about controlling expenses when income is theoretically unlimited, right? And the reason that I bring that up is because I think ultimately something that I talk about with income a lot relates to the one piece of advice that I would have. And that's that income is about the value exchange that we have, right? Like, whether I'm an employee or I'm an entrepreneur, I'm exchanging value in the world. And so often people will think about, let's say that you're an employee and you're self-promoting, right? When you go in your interview, you're doing a form of self-promotion. Many people are shy about that. But if you can frame that self-promotion in the value exchange that you bring to that particular company, then you're doing it in the right way, because you're saying, hey, like, I know that you as a company are really focused on, let's say, increasing your employee experience, because you recognize that better employee experience means a better customer experience for the people who are coming into your sports bar or whatever, right?
Yeah.
If then you frame your answer to a particular question always in, hey, what I do is I help to elevate employee experience because of X, Y, or Z. I'm a connector, I'm a communicator, whatever it is. I enable people to be able to live their best selves and to ask deeper questions, which then expands upon the relationship, whatever it is, then you're doing that value exchange. And so for me, I have ultimately tried to live by a couple of principles. One of them, for example, is practice maximum enthusiasm, which I got from a friend of mine many years ago. And that has done me really well. Like, there are a lot of ways in which I think that fun and productivity go hand in hand. If we can ask ourselves, how do I enjoy this experience? Whatever it is, just 10% more, then ultimately you're probably going to become 10% more productive with whatever it is you're doing just by way of figuring out how you can enjoy that experience 10% more. So that one piece of advice would be essentially find your principles that really work for you. And I'm not saying go and take mine. Like we started this conversation with, I don't want you to feel like you should go do something. I want you to say, hey, I could try this and experiment with it and see what works for me. So practice maximum enthusiasm is one of 5 principles that I try to live by. Go and experiment with some and see what works for you, and ultimately figure out what principles you're going to live your life by that allow you to have the maximum amount of value exchange with the community that you live in and the world that's a greater place.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I know one thing that you told me earlier was help make your money more joyful.
Yeah.
Which I think is great in conjunction with the practice maximum enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So I think that having a positive attitude, showing that enthusiasm, having a love for life, you also attract that in your life too. And then when you talked about controlling expenses as well, I totally agree with you. Rather than trying to, drive farther to save 10 cents a gallon on gas.
Yeah.
Why don't you, and I think it was Robert Kiyosaki who talked about, not what is it I can afford, it's how can I afford that. So, your cash flow is king, and, it technically could be unlimited. So I always think about how can we increase our cash flow and make it a positive cash flow, right? So you're looking at that broader picture. But as you become more valuable in the marketplace, as you keep giving back, as you become more knowledgeable, you can see things from a different perspective and grow, become more valuable, do other things with your money, and really become and have more tools in your belt to do more with your life. And ultimately, it comes down to yourself and knowing yourself and what works best for you. So thank you so much, Marshall, for being on.
You just hit upon another one of my principles, which is practice perspective expansion.
Yeah.
And the whole point there is like, hey, so often we have a conversation because we want to convince the other person that we're right. But like, what if every conversation you just try to step into somebody else's shoes and see whatever the situation is from their angle, like that expands your adaptability. It expands your ability to understand your customer. It creates tolerance. Like, it does so many things for you to simply try to expand your perspective beyond the one that we're stuck in right now. So yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Well, and it's really all about building awareness.
Yeah.
Ultimately, building the most awareness that you can have in all aspects of life, right? And I think that that's what we're trying to do. If we are only seeing the world through, a pinhole, what would we see if we expanded it, just 2 times larger, 4 times larger, or whatever, just to see the broader picture. So cool.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. This has been great. Where can we find you? If anybody has some questions or anything, can they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. The main place is I've been doing a lot on my LinkedIn. I'm just Marshall M. Moore on there. I have an Instagram account. I'm not on it as often, but feel free to hit me up on that. It's at Making Money Joyful. And then
At Making Money Joyful.
At Making Money Joyful. Yeah. I need to focus on that one more. But again, we talked about this a little bit. I get on Instagram and man, I just start scrolling. And so I've kind of avoided it a little bit more than I probably should. And then on our On Tap Credit Union YouTube channel. We're uploading content every single week now. We're getting into a good groove with that. And we also have a ton of free resources for people in the community, well, anywhere, that you can go and grab that dive way more into this idea of how do we begin to make our money more joyful. We didn't even scratch the surface on that front. There's a lot there. I encourage people to go check it out, explore. One of the very preliminary resources that I have in that regard is called Top 5 Money Hacks. It's meant to be the quick start guide to how do we start to develop a more joyful relationship with our money. So it's like super short. I know that people aren't going to read a novel these days, but if they actually do the 5 steps and they practice the questions and the exercises that are in there, it's like, hey, you're going to be 80% of the way there already just doing those 5 things.
Nice. Can you elaborate on the 5 things really quick? Quick overview.
Yeah.
What are they?
Totally. So the first one is understand your money psychology. As we talked about previously.
So we already talked about that one a little bit. Yep.
We have to hit upon that. The second one is subscribe to your savings. This is a really easy way to begin to do things in a more productive way financially. So take the Netflix psychology, right? Where it's a subscription. I'm not even looking at the $20 a month going out of my account. Do that for yourself. So set up an automated monthly contribution into your savings and investment accounts where you just deal with it. And I say deal with it. Part of the thing there is that this is actually an analogy that comes from Mike Michalowicz also is, and this happens on the business side of things too, is when you take your savings first or your investments first, or on the business side, when you take your profit first, it leaves less amount for your expenses. And how do you deal with that? Well, you have less to begin with. And so you're going to figure it out, because just like when you have a toothpaste that the whole thing is full, you're just like, cool, I'm using all the toothpaste. But when you get down to that last little bit, you're figuring out how to get the last bit of that toothpaste out there, right? And we do that with
makes you more efficient
as an entrepreneur or even just as an individual. The third one is guilt-free spending. This is a term that comes from Ramit Sethi, fantastic financial resource out there. And basically what it is it's the wants section of the classic 50-30-20 principle. Lots to be adjusted with the 50-30-20 principle, but like how accurate, I love that term, right? Because how accurate is it? We feel guilty when we spend on ourselves. And yet, like, what's the point of it all? So what you do with your guilt-free spending is, once you can see the playing field and you know, I have exactly this amount going into my guilt-free spending account every month. Let's say you have $750 a month. Just for you. Maybe you have 1,000, whatever it is. You got to look at your own cash flow plan, which is another resource is included in that Top 5 Money Hacks guide. You get a free copy of this cash flow spreadsheet, has a lot of instructions in there for how to do it. But once you see the playing field using that cash flow plan, then what you're able to do is say, all right, I have $750 a month that's going towards my guilt-free spending. Cool. I'm setting up an automated contribution into my second checking account, my guilt-free account. And then I don't have to be doing the tracking throughout the month and keeping receipts and stuff like that. I can do what most people do and most entrepreneurs do, bank balance accounting. I log into my bank accounts, see what's in there, and I'm like, okay, here's how much I have to go. So if you do that, then let's say you have $750 a month, your first month, you might, not everybody, a lot of people are like they kind of get the flow over time with it. But let's say that you have somebody who does that, and 5 days into month number 1, they've already blown through half of their guilt-free spending. Then all it does is it creates a way to bring awareness to what you're spending your money on in a way that is, you're not like going in and tracking and pulling out the different colored highlighters for your credit card statements. You're just doing it naturally through like, oh, dang, like I spent more than, hold on. Was all of that stuff that I intentionally wanted to spend on? And this goes into the broader picture of things also, where if you use that cash flow plan, basically what you're able to do is start asking yourself questions like, for example, many people will realize, I have a housing expense ratio that's pretty high. So I'm spending more on my housing than would be recommended. Well, of course, Colorado is expensive, but there are ways to get around that. Like, if I'm young, what if I was to take on a roommate? That's a job in itself. Like, you got to find the right person, do tenant selection. You got to decide whether you're going to ever have dishes in the sink, all that type of stuff. But when people are asked the question, and then I'm thinking specifically about a lot of young people I ask this question to, is like, hey, do you love getting up every morning and having your own apartment to yourself? Or if it meant you could take one more awesome vacation a year, would you take on a roommate to be able to do that, right? And then, of course, there's the long-term stuff too of like, hey, let's look at what if you were to invest another $200 a month into these retirement accounts or even a traditional brokerage, what would that look like? Sometimes people are like, oh, dang, like,
Yeah. The power of compounding.
puts it. Yeah, I mean, but like we can't visual, like that's not how our brains think, right?
Yeah.
So until you actually go in and say, hey, what happens if I do that extra $200 a month? Investor.com compound interest calculator is perfect one, right? It's just super easy. Go in and play with it and start putting some numbers in and see like where are you going to be in, you know, let's say 35 years. If you're 30 and you're going to retire at 65, where are you going to be? Like sometimes people are like, oh, I'm at 700K. That's not enough for me to retire. All right, well then like let's make some adjustments here. Where like what could we do here? What could we, and that's how we start to get really intentional about how we're going to allocate our spending, which actually is another one of the tips. And then the last one is and this is like a little bit of a cheater tip because it's to essentially create a way to, in a low maintenance, low time frame amount of time, be able to continually come back to your finances in a way that's actually fun and say like, okay, how am I feeling about this? Am I using my money intentionally to design the life that I want to live? Where do I want to make small tweaks and adjustments based on the big dials that I can turn? Not getting trapped in all those small details like expenses and stuff.
Yeah. Great knowledge to give to your clients and customers and your community. So I think that that's great. People that need to know these things, find you on LinkedIn, Instagram, or on Tap Credit Union.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to put some of these into my practice and my life as well. So definitely learned a lot. And it's always great talking to a teacher. So thank you, Marshall.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
sure.
for having me.
Definitely.